Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for April 11th through 17th. This week I read 4 books, I watched 4 shows, I watched 2 movies, and I listened to 2 books. Firstly, I just wanted to thank everybody who wished me a happy birthday. It was my birthday past Tuesday, so I did the birthday book tag. I've done other things in the past for my birthday. Those are all linked in that video. Let's go on with this one. The first book that I finished this week is Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. This is a Peter Pan reimagining about this girl named Wendy who 5 years previously was out in the woods with her brothers and they went missing. It's always been this mystery in her small town as to what happened to them because initially she went missing as well, and then about 6 months later she was found in the woods, but she had no memory of what happened. She grew up with her mother always telling her stories about this character named Peter Pan, and then she used to tell the stories to her little brothers, and now she tells the stories to the children of the town that visit the hospital where she does volunteer work. It then of course becomes completely confusing when on her 18th birthday she meets somebody claiming to be Peter Pan. I purposefully use the word reimagining as opposed to retelling because if you're going into this looking for a straight retelling in a new setting, that's not what you're going to get. Are you going to get mentions of Peter Pan and Wendy Darling and her family? Yes. Is this going to take place in Neverland and have Captain Hook and Tinkerbell and crocodiles? No. This ends up being all about Wendy and Peter's quest not only to find Wendy's brothers, but to find all of these other children that are going missing in this small town. I ended up really enjoying my time with this book. There were points where I definitely cried, so thanks again for that, Aiden, and I highly recommend it if it sounds like it would be up your alley. This week I also read The Backstagers and the Theater of the Ancients. This is the second in the middle grade novel series, which is a spin-off of the graphic novel series. This book starts out with all the backstagers at an amusement park for the day, and they're having the time of their lives, and one of them takes a picture of the group that goes on the internet, and then somebody sees the notebook that Jory is holding in his hand in the photo and goes, "Oh my goodness, it's the designer's notebook." This is something that Jory got, I believe, in probably the first graphic novel, and basically once he designs something in this notebook, it can happen in real life. There are other backstage crews around the world that would stop at nothing to get this, so a plot is formed to steal it from him. This was really neat because not only does it deal with social media and the fame that one can have there and that whole new kettle of fish that we're dealing with in this day and age, it also took us to Greece and we got to see the first ever theater, which is just neat because I remember when I was personally in Greece and went to Athens, I definitely had to go see some old amphitheaters because I just had to. Being a theater kid, I just had to go. As always, this is entertaining and heartfelt and intersectional, and I highly suggest these books. Because I needed a little bit more of the Backstagers in my life, I also got the Backstagers Halloween Intermission #1 from Hoopla, which is one of the services for my library where you can read graphic novels. And I believe this was 4 different tales. 1 is the majority of the comic, and then 3 are just little vignettes of things that might happen around the Backstagers around Halloween. I think that at least 1, if not all of these, were in the volume 3 that they did that had Halloween and I believe Valentine's Day kind of just meshed together as the 3rd volume of the graphic novel. But either way, it was fun to revisit these characters through the graphic novel format. This week for Disability Readathon I also read Unbroken, 13 stories starring disabled teens, and it's exactly what it says on the tin. This was 13 different stories from 13 different authors with disabled teens as the protagonists, and it was just a lot of fun. Obviously the representation and the genre of the stories was different story to story. I found myself enjoying most of them. There were some technical issues I had with a couple of them, but overall I very much enjoyed this collection and would highly recommend it. Off the top of my head, the representation included characters who were blind, used wheelchairs, had chronic pain, and what I really enjoyed was going into these not knowing what kind of story you were going to get, and then at the end of it you're like, oh, I really fell for these characters, and then suddenly you have to meet new ones, which was fun. It was weird because I wanted more but was also satisfied at the same time. On to the shows I watched this week. I watched a lot more of The Chef Show. It is just easy to sit down and put on while I'm eating something and just see them having their culinary adventures and living their best lives. That's just all it is. And then occasionally I have also seen or heard of the other people that happen to be cooking with them, which is also fun. We also watched more of Bones, and we finally got to the end of the Pallant storyline, which if you know the show, you know what that is, and we were very happy to finally get there because he is just the worst, and we just wanted to not have to deal with his shenanigans anymore. We also watched more Malcolm in the Middle, and it was finally announced that Lois is pregnant with their 5th child, so there's that going on at this point. This means we also made it to the episode where she was fantasizing if all of her children were girls instead of boys and how much nicer that would have been, but then ultimately realizing that, hey, we might have different issues if we were raising girls and they might still be little shits, you never know. And then, even though for whatever reason I thought it was going to be the finale of RuPaul's Drag Race, it was a reunion show, which is just like, is this season never going to come to a conclusion? I thought it was going to end last week, and then it didn't, and then we got a reunion show, and that's probably my fault for not paying closer attention, but I just thought we were going to get the finale, and we didn't, so the finale is coming up this week. Ultimately, this was a fun episode. I like that we kind of got the reunion vibe of the different cast members asking fan questions to each other over Skype, and then they also got to produce all their own music videos, which I thought was really cool. However, I just want to see who's going to be crowned. I just cannot wait for this Friday. In honor of my birthday, we decided to watch a movie that came out the same year I was born, so we watched Little Shop of Horrors, which I hadn't seen in a really long time. I'm more familiar with the stage show because I think on that one I did Tech of Some Persuasion. I think it might have been Spotlight. But that means I watched the show over and over and over again, so when I went to watch the movie, I noticed the little differences, even though I had seen the movie before, obviously. If you're not familiar, Little Shop of Horrors is a musical in which a guy named Seymour finds this really strange plant, and he puts it in the window of the flower shop he works in, and it just attracts more and more customers. But he doesn't know how to make this plant thrive until one day he finds out that it feeds on blood. Things that I recognized about the movie in particular is we got this amazing scene with Bill Murray that I'm pretty sure does not exist in the stage play. That seemed to replace Orin Scrivello's second song, which is kind of my favorite song, so that was a little bit of a bummer for me. But then we got this weird song at the end that was just kind of a rock and roll hit, so there was that. There were also a couple of little differences here and there. That's fine. You don't need to know about them. It is a fun and strange and weird time, so if you've never seen it before, I highly suggest watching it. However, as my roommate pointed out, there is one character where if you haven't seen the show 100 times, you might have trouble understanding what she's saying. She speaks with a very thick accent. And at first my roommate was like, I think I've heard this voice before. And I'm like, well, it's the voice that literally everyone puts on to play this character. So instead of listening to lines like, they say Seymour's the greatest, but I'm dating a semi-sadist, you're instead trying to figure out, they say Seymour's the greatest, but I'm dating a semi-sadist, so I got a black eye and my arm's in a cast. And it's a little bit much for some people, but again, I've watched the show so many times that I know the lyrics. The other movie we watched this week was the 1994 classic Clerks. I had not watched this in a very long time. I remember witty dialogue, and I remember it obviously being black and white because it only took $23,000 to make because it was made on a budget and all of those things. It was Kevin Smith's first movie. Things that I really liked about it are the little gags that I remember. This version also, for whatever reason, had the Lost scene that they later animated like years and years later, so it was interesting that that was just kind of stuck in there because as we were watching the movie I was like, oh, after this I'm going to have to go hunt out that scene because I remember it being really interesting because it brings in his other works like Dogma and Mallrats and Chasing Amy. The dialogue of this movie overall is very clever, but some of the situations and the dialogue are also heavily dated and just not what you would say nowadays. So if you're ever going to go into this, just know that ahead of time. It is definitely a 1994 movie. If you've never seen it before, it's a movie about this guy named Dante who is not supposed to go into work that day but ends up going into work because somebody else is sick, and then a lot of shenanigans go down in that day in particular. On to the books I listened to this week, the first one being Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, and just wow. Wow. This book is about a girl named Claudia who comes home from visiting her grandmother all summer and expects to see her best friend, but her best friend's not there. She goes to school and her best friend is not there. She's constantly asking her mother and everybody she can get a hold of, what happened to Monday? Where's Monday? Why won't she talk to me? And she just cannot find her best friend. This is a hard-hitting contemporary with obviously this mystery spin because you're constantly trying to figure out what happened to Monday Charles. It is a lot to take in. There are a lot of revelations in this, and there's a whole host of different trigger warnings, but I wrote down a few in particular. There are mentions of previous miscarriages, so keep that in mind, as well as violence and homophobia. There's probably much more that can be mentioned, but that's just all I can think of off the top of my head. This also had a very interesting twist near the end, and I'm just going to have to read everything by this author because this book was incredibly well done. I've also read Grown, so now I'm just going to have to read everything else. The other book I watched this week was One to Watch by Katie Stayman London. This book is about Bea, who's a plus-size fashion blogger, and one day she and her best friend are watching This World's version of The Bachelor, and she's starting to live tweet it and drinking some wine and talking about how everybody on this show is a size 0 and they never have any diversity when it comes to weight as well as ethnicity and all of these types of things, and how it's also very heteronormative and all of these types of things. And as the night progresses, one of her followers asks if she's going to write a blog post about it, and while she's drunk, she does that. That blog post goes viral and it ends up changing the whole course of the show. A few months later, the new production lead of the show asks her to be the Bachelorette character. Initially, and actually throughout the entire process, she's pretty hesitant about this because people online are the worst. She is plus size. A lot of people are just filled with hatred for the fact that she is on the show. She receives death threats. People tell her that she's going to end up single. There's all these different worries that go into this because the public is truly unkind. On top of this, this is a reality show, so she doesn't know if she can trust what the men on the show are saying to her. However, she's trying to get over this guy that was a complete dick to her, so why not do that on national television? I don't watch dating reality shows, but I do watch reality shows, so I found this incredibly fascinating, and I overall very much enjoyed my experience with it. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as the link to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!